Hey, welcome to Upon Further Review, brought to you by Coors Light. I'm your host, Paul Gutierrez, and it's been a very busy week for the Raiders' new head coach, Clint Kubiak. Not only went back to Seattle for a Super Bowl championship parade, got back, hit the ground running, hired as many as 7 coaches for his staff. The big ones, though, the coordinators, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Here to help me break it all down, my guy, J-Rock, Jason Horowitz, the voice of the Raiders.
Well, first of all, you're the only person who has ever called me J-Rock.
I'm going to stick with it, too. It's going to become a thing.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get Kirk Morrison to do that on a regular basis here. I think with the big spots, right, because most people, look, an entire coaching staff is made up of so many different people, but the ones that everyone usually focuses on, obviously, are head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. And the first thing that stands out is they are all in their mid to late 30s. Yeah. And Clint Kubiak is 38 years old, and Rob Leonard, promoted, is 38 years old, and Andrew Janocko, I believe, is 37 years old. So, the thing that stands out is you go from what was last year, where Pete Carroll became the oldest head coach in the history of the NFL, and you bring in Chip Kelly, who was in his 60s, and some of the other folks who were on staff were older and experienced. And I think the first thing that stands out is this group is younger. Now, Joe DeCamillis has been around the league a long time. He is in his 50s or 60s, and Mike McCoy is the same thing. So, like, they're the people who are particularly Mike McCoy, who is going to be the associate head coach or assistant head coach, is someone who has been a head coach in this league, who has been around in this league, who knows this division very well, and for that matter was an interim head coach last year with the Tennessee Titans. So you're getting someone who has some experience, and obviously who has experience with Clint Kubiak and Clint Kubiak dad, Gary Kubiak. Right. So I think those two things stand out the most, the difference of age from last year's staff to this year's staff. And then obviously for the first year head coach, some of the ties he has to both he and the places he's been, but also ties to his dad, Gary Kubiak.
Right off the bat, just your knee-jerk reaction to these hires of offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the staff is younger, which is a stark contrast to what was a major storyline going into last year, where Pete Carroll became the oldest head coach in the history of the NFL. And then the other part is, I think it's interesting that they're going in-house, or he chose to stay in-house to hire his defensive coordinator. Rob Leonard's been with the Raiders on staff the entire time that Patrick Graham was the defensive coordinator. And obviously Clint Kubiak, as he said on his introductory press conference, of course, I've got a list of interesting candidates. And I find it really intriguing that after talking with whoever they wanted to talk to as the possibility of being defensive coordinator, that he liked enough or wanted more to get what Rob Leonard is going to offer. He has worked with Patrick Graham extensively, not just with the Raiders, but before the Raiders. And so you ask that question, like, what is his influence, and one of the things that I'll be interested to find out as we get to, talk to Rob Leonard a little bit differently in a different role over the next few months is, what did you like about what you did with this defense, or what you were part of with this defense for the last 4 years with Patrick Graham, and what did you not like, and how do you want to do it differently? I do think that, it's not just Max Crosby that stands out, though, from the defensive line, which is what Rob Leonard was in charge of. I think there were a lot of standout stuff that happened. And you and I both know this. Like, this group has to get so much, but he knows this. Rob knows this. Like, the defense has to get so much better, and the defensive line needs more talent. They need an infusion. Anyone who talks about what did the Raiders, we're in the middle of February here, and the combine's next week, and the free agent process is less than a month away, and then the draft is 2 months away. And like, anyone who's writing anything right now about the Las Vegas Raiders beyond a quarterback, what are the two things that they say this team has to drastically improve on? And it's offensive line and it's defensive line. And so, who knows that better than the guy who was in charge of the defensive line over the last few years? But I'm going to guess, PG, he thinks that there's some stuff here on this defensive line, or he thinks there is some talent on this defensive line and some of the young guys that they can be better and will be better moving forward. But I am very intrigued to find out what he wants to do differently than what this team has done the last 4 years, where Patrick Graham was the defensive coordinator.
On that side of the ball, on the defensive side of the ball especially, you figured that he might want somebody that had some experience there already, because he's a first-time head coach. He's going to be the play caller. His offensive coordinator, Andrew Janocko, is coming with him. He's come with him for a couple different stops, New Orleans to Seattle, now to Las Vegas, as a quarterback's coach. So when you look at what you just explained about what Rob Leonard may not bring to the table as a play caller, it'll be the first time he'll be a play caller on defense, what does Andrew Janocko Because you don't want to say, well, he's just kind of a glorified quarterbacks coach, but that's all he's been able to do so far. And obviously it will be Clint Kubiak's offense, and Clint will be the primary play caller.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once upon a time, Clint Kubiak was only a quarterbacks coach too, right?
True.
So, there's nothing wrong with that. And obviously there's some continuity there. And, Clint Kubiak talked about that at his press conference too, because someone asked him, are you planning to still call the plays? How's it going to work? Who's in charge of what? And he said it's a collaborative effort. So part of that collaboration is someone that he knows very well. You look at who he worked with, what stands out. Obviously, everyone's going to point to, particularly even with Clint Kubiak, they're going to point to Sam Darnold. He's a Super Bowl winning quarterback after, up until 2 years ago, people talked about Sam Darnold as a bust who was never going to make it. And obviously we've discussed that story ad nauseum over the past couple of years, right? 14 wins with the Vikings, and this year they do it again with the Seahawks, and then you don't just get to the playoffs, you win the whole thing. And so I think what Clint Kubiak is as he said in his introductory press conference, someone asked him, are you going to continue calling the plays, and how do you see it doing that now that you're also the head coach? And he was very specific and adamant to say, hey, it is a group effort. Yes, I'm calling the plays, but there's going to be a large group involved with a lot of different things as to what plays we're going to call. How do we like this? What do we like that? And this is someone that he has now been with for a couple of years, right? They were together in New Orleans. They went together from New Orleans to Seattle. Yeah. And the other thing that stands out to me about Andrew Janocko, obviously a long time there in Minnesota, working with a bunch of different folks there, but the Chicago Bears, right? Justin Fields is someone who's looked at right now, PG, as someone who is not a successful quarterback and a first-round NFL draft pick that's not good. But he had some really successful moments with Chicago Bears.
He did.
And who was his quarterback coach?
Yeah.
This guy. And not to say that Fernando Mendoza, and I know you just said, another time, assuming Fernando Mendoza is a Raider, not to say that he and Justin Fields are the same, because they are not. Right. But he got a lot out of, or he was part of a staff that got a lot out of Justin Fields when he was in Chicago, and why you could point to that there might be success. So I like that too.
Let's flip back to Rob Leonard on defense, though, because, again, there's something to be said about continuity. There's a ton of free agents, though, the Raiders have to make decisions on the defensive side of the ball. I mentioned earlier you thought that he might have went with somebody with some experience there already, but maybe that experience being in the building, that carries its weight in silver and black. But what are some of Rob Leonard's what's his philosophies? I'd like to sit down with him and say, hey, are you a 4-3 guy? You a 3-4 guy? You a nickel in base? Are you multiple? What is it? What would you like to get sitting down with Rob Leonard?
Well, I wonder how much Rob Leonard watched the Seahawks and what Mike McDonald built. Because, we can talk all we want, and the Seahawks offense was very good, and Sam Darnold was very good, and Jackson Smith and Jigba became the best receiver in football, all of that this past year with Clint Kubiak running the offense. But they won the Super Bowl, particularly the game itself, with a dominant defense, right? Yeah. And they've scored on many possessions, a lot of field goals, but it was the defense in the actual Super Bowl that went on to just dominate that football game. So I'm very curious to see how different of a philosophy Rob Leonard has than what we've seen over the last 4 years, because a lot of his background is with Patrick Graham, who was the defensive coordinator the entire time that Rob Leonard has been here. And so I'm very curious to say, hey, what did you like about what you guys did as a defense, or the philosophy the last few years, and how do you want to run your defense differently? And I think we're all going to say the same thing, PG. Personnel is going to look a lot different,
right?
For this defense, because so many guys that were on the defense last year were on 1-year contracts, and the thing that's hanging over the conversation of that defense is obviously Max Crosby and what will happen with Max this offseason. So that plays a role as well, and maybe Rob Leonard and Max Crosby's relationship plays a part in that conversation too. So a lot of unknowns, a lot of excitement. As you always get when you have a completely fresh start from what was a really rough year.
I like how you put it as excitement, Jason. That's why I like having you on here. And like I told you before, if Adam Horowitz from the Beastie Boys can be Ad Rock, Jason Horowitz from the Raiders can be J Rock. Jason, thanks for joining me and helping me break down the coordinators.
It's always exciting, Paul. It's February.
Exactly. We'll talk to you soon. Hey, don't go anywhere, because coming up next, got Jim Plunkett. He is an inaugural member, or a member of the inaugural class of the Hispanic Football Hall of Fame. He's coming up. We're going to break down that, as well as his thoughts on Clint Kubiak being the head coach. He was here to greet him.
Meet Max Out. He's a credit wrecker. His eyes are bigger than his wallet. And his credit score pays the price. You see, Max doesn't know he should only use 30% or less of his credit limit, because using his full line can lower his score. Don't be like Max Out. Instead, learn how to avoid the wreckers at creditwreckers.com. Credit One Bank, for what's ahead.
Raiders lead 13-10. Christensen swings across. That's a great Raider play over the years. Used to be Plunkett looking deep. He's got the first down. 30 to the left. Allen was split to the right. And it's Branch for a touchdown. Anthony Washington, the defender. Protection. Throwing for King. Could go all the way. 40, 30. Touchdown, Oakland.
I remember that guy. Welcome back to Upon Further Review. Jim Plunkett, thank you so much for joining. I didn't know you were a big disco guy, man. I like the soundtrack to your years with the Raiders.
Well, that's what we do. You know, we put things together, make them sound modern.
And go from there. Hey, number one, thank you for joining me. Number two, congratulations on being elected on the first class for the Hispanic Football Hall of Fame. Number three, I mean, just what does it mean to you, just kind of your knee-jerk reaction to getting that call and being told that you're part of this inaugural class?
Well, it's you know, it's quite historic. I'm glad to be part of this this class, the first Hispanic quarterback to go in this particular what do you call it? Hall of Fame. So yeah. I'm very happy about it.
When it comes to not just yourself, but there's a 7-person class. You're in there with 2 other Raiders, and I wrote a column about it, and I kind of crunched the numbers. And between 1979 and 1983, you, Coach Flores, Tom Flores, and Ted Hendricks, you shared the sideline. Now you get to share immortality together. How much more special does it make it to go in there, not only with your coach, but with the linebacker that was very much a game changer on the other side of the ball?
Oh, without question. Tom was in my opinion, a great coach. He put us together. It was a different time, and they were struggling a little bit, and fortunately, I wound up with the Raiders and put some games together. And Ted Hendricks is just, was always a great linebacker. Very tall for a linebacker, but it was hard to get to his legs. So, he was quite the performer and made a lot of big plays, especially when they were passing. He put us, he'd stand up, his arms were tall, and he blocked so many passes. He was a great linebacker.
You obviously played against him too in your career, early in your career. Your number 1 overall draft pick by the then Boston Patriots, won a Heisman Trophy at Stanford. Shout out to my father-in-law, who also was at Stanford the same time you were, and every time we talk, he's like, "Tell Jim I said hello." So Bob says hello. But beyond that,
say hello to him for me.
I will, and Amy too, my wife. Obviously, you know her from her days working as a producer with Silver and Black Productions too.
Sure. You
guys being together at that time, and I've talked with Tom about this over the years, and yeah, he said it didn't really hit him at the time that you guys were breaking barriers or blazing trails for Latinos, for Hispanics in the NFL. For you, did it feel like that at the time, and or did it kind of come later in your career or after your career when it really kind of hit you that, hey, we did some pretty cool things as Latinos in the NFL?
Oh, correct. But, I was there to do a job. He was there to do a job. And that came first, no matter what nationality you were, he was to coach us and put us in the right position. And I was to help make things work offensively. We wound up being great friends after he retired. So, it was a great relationship and it worked out for the both of us.
You talked about Ted a little bit about being one of the greatest linebackers. Obviously, he's already in Canton. He has his gold jacket. Tom is there as well.
Right.
When it came to Ted, and you mentioned it, and Tom mentioned this to me when I spoke to him the other night after the class was announced, was that not a lot of people realized that Ted was Latino. He was Hispanic. That his mother was Guatemalan. He was born in Guatemala City. Did you guys ever talk about that as teammates about where Ted was from, or did he speak a little bit of Spanish just to kind of throw guys off? I know, as you said, he did things his own way. He was definitely a character.
He certainly was, and the guy knew football, but we didn't talk about our Hispanic situation at all, and he was his own man, I tell you, and the coach would call a play on defense, and then he would see them line up, and he knew exactly what the play was going to be. So no matter what the defense was called, he would move over one way or the other because he knew where that ball was going. He was a great, great player.
And he's one of the few players in the Hall of Fame. I know John Elway's another one. Peyton Manning, I believe, is another whose last game was a Super Bowl win. And I know back then the Pro Bowl was the week after the Super Bowl, but for the purposes of this conversation, he's one of those rare guys. For yourself, looking forward, a lot of people talk about you as potentially at some point getting that recognition. How much would that mean to you? Is it something that you think about getting? Obviously this is a huge honor for the Hispanic Football Hall of Fame, but the Pro Football Hall of Fame, is that something that you think about a lot, or is it just something that people talk to you about and it's like, well, if it happens, it happens?
Well, mostly people talk a lot about it, and a lot of my friends say, why aren't you in the Hall of Fame? Both Hispanic and non-Hispanic. Yeah. And, there's nothing I can worry about because, I have no say in it, and if I get in, that would be great. Great for my family, great for our children. It would just be, something that, happens. And if I do go in, I find it very fortunate. Something
that a lot of people don't realize, I think, is that you're in the Pro Football record book, and you're never going to be taken out because you have a 99-yard pass to Cliff Branch. So nobody's going to ever be able to beat that. Some people might be able to equal it, but nobody's going to beat that. Cliff Branch at Washington in the 1983 season. Beyond that, it's funny. Like, I go back to 2009. I've covered this team since 2005. I've gotten to know you over the years. But I remember at the 2009 NFL owners meetings, Al Davis was holding court with a bunch of reporters, and he was advocating for your inclusion into the Hall of Fame. And he was just basically yelling at people that were there. I remember he was yelling at Peter King, and he said, how many quarterbacks have won 2 Super Bowls, have never been, are not in the Hall of Fame? And some Weisenheimer said, well, Tom Brady. And then Al, he just looked at me and said, yeah, he won the Tuck Rule game, the SOB, but he didn't say SOB. He said something else. And then he said he could do something else with himself. But to know that Al Davis had your back through those years, and I know you and I talked the morning after Mr. Davis passed, what was that relationship like with you, or for you, with him coming to the Raiders and the way your career went?
Well, in a sense, he kept my career going. I was with New England, San Francisco, got cut, out of a job, and he felt there was a lot left in me, and he played an important part in my life, my career. He was a good man. We talked a lot, and the guy knew football. He wasn't, your typical owner per se, but he knew it was, X's and O's, and he was very informative in that regard. And he stood by me. Didn't start out real well, but as it went on, there he was. And he'd point out things that you did in a game, whether they're good or bad, and try to make you a better player.
I remember you told me once that he pulled you aside and said, Jim, it doesn't matter if you play well or if you look well. All that matters is that we win the game.
Yeah, you got it right. He only cared about winning, Whether I threw 4 interceptions and we won the game, way to go, Jim.
But if you threw 4 touchdowns and you lost, what would that reaction be? What would that conversation be like?
Should have thrown 5.
And there's a guy out there as a Heisman winner. You are very much in tune with what's going on out there. The Raiders have the number 1 overall pick, and Al Davis has passed on, but now Mark Davis runs the show here.
Right.
Raiders have the number 1 overall pick, and there's a guy out there, Jim, that there's going to be a lot of connections being made, especially with his heritage. He's Cuban American, but being Latino nonetheless. From Miami, played at Cal for a year, went and won a national championship, had a season for the ages for the Hoosiers at Indiana. What do you know about his game, and how could that potentially translate into the NFL, especially being a Heisman Trophy winner who could potentially be a number 1 pick for, your old team?
Well, I haven't seen him play a whole lot, to tell you the truth. I don't watch too many Miami games, but
Indiana.
I mean Indiana. I'm sorry, and my wife's correcting me because
Always
I
have to have an on-site producer, no doubt.
Yeah, pretty well. Yeah, but I got to pay her.
Oh, fair.
No, but I'm looking forward to his play. He's tall. He's got a good arm. He knows football extremely well. I've watched him play, watched him on film, and I look forward to him joining the Raiders. There's no question about it. He's taller than me, though. I can't stand that.
I know. Well, you were 6'3" when you played, right?
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah. We'll just leave it at
They
that.
beat a little more of my height down, but that's okay.
When it comes to being a Heisman Trophy winner and being a #1 overall pick and the pressures that come with that, I mean, your situation was completely different, obviously. Going to the Patriots, which was a very bad team at that time, right after the NFL-AFL merger. What was that pressure like that you felt and that Fernando may kind of feel if he is indeed the #1 pick of the Raiders?
Well, I went to the worst team in the league, the Patriots, so they got the first choice. And it was a struggle, We had a good first year, and things kind of went downhill after that, a lot of pressure on the quarterback, no matter where he's playing, whether you go to a good team or a bad team, it all seems to fall on the quarterback. And, having, seen film and watching him play, I think that Fernando will do a very good job. He's calm. He's pretty cool and collected. Got a good, strong arm. He seems to read the defense as well. So, I think it'll be an easier job for him as he enters the NFL than it was for me.
And then with him potentially being the #1 pick, we do know this, that the Raiders do have a new head coach, Clint Kubiak. You were here. Right. You were part of the Raiders royalty, as my colleague Levi Edwards said. The Raiders brought in the Avengers. You were up there at the podium. Howie Long, Marcus Allen, Mike Haynes, Charles Woodson, Rich Gannon. You guys all welcomed him into the building. What did that mean? I guess let me ask you first, from a personal perspective. What did that mean to you to be among those that were chosen to come in and to welcome the new coach?
Well, it's how the Raiders organization and Mark Davis felt about me, that I belong there to welcome him in. And I was very proud to be there with Marcus and, all the other, really, really great players. And so, I was happy to be there and be a part of it.
The cool thing about it too, Jim, when I was looking at everybody that was up there, you had Hall of Famers, you had Gold Jackets, you had yourself a Super Bowl MVP, you had 2002 the regular season MVP, Rich Gannon, and all the guys that were up there, you all represented the last two Raiders teams to go to a Super Bowl, the 2002 team and you guys in 1983. When you look at Clint Kubiak, and I know you said at the time you didn't really study much of him, but you did play against his father, who was a backup to Elway. Another Stanford guy, obviously, but Gary played in the NFL for a while. What can Raider fans, do you think, expect from that coaching tree, that type of offense going forward?
No, I think he's going to be experienced. He's going to be confident. He's going to be relaxed because of his background, and I think that will help tremendously.
Jim, thank you so much for your time. I know it is always a pleasure of mine to get to talk with you at any point in time. But to get this all done here on Zoom, again, the modern marvels of technology. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, congratulations on your selection for the Hispanic Football Hall of Fame. And we're going to see you because Cinco de Mayo, that's when the class is actually going to be inducted. It's
that's right.
You three at the Raiders, but also Anthony Munoz, Ron Rivera, Tom Fears, and Steve Van Buren. So a phenomenal first class. It's going to be great. Jim, thank you so much for joining me.
Good talking to you.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Upon Further Review. I want to give thanks to our guests, Jason Horowitz and Jim Plunkett, for reviewing all the recent news going on with the Raiders. To stay up to date on all things silver and black, you can visit the Raiders YouTube channel and Raiders.com for more content, including my column, which I wrote about the start of the Hispanic Football Hall of Fame, including those three Raiders that are in the inaugural class. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time.